Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Sri Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you guys for joining. We're about to start this Darbar now. I'm going to run through some announcement stuff before we begin. Hopefully you guys can hear us, you can see us. If you can, well, not see us, at least see the screen being shared. If you are in the chat, leave a chat if you can hear us, etc. Or if you have any problems. Okay, so I'm going to run through maybe some of our monthly roundup first to begin this Darbar. And then from there, we'll have a presentation given by Ajit Singh. Let me just turn this music down. Hold on, let me pause the lag. Yeah, and then we'll give Ajit Singh's going to give a presentation on energy markets from a Sikh perspective. So we'll go through that. We're like a discussion-based format. So we'll go through some slides that we've prepared, or Ajit Singh's prepared, and hopefully that'll be quite insightful. So before we begin, I'll start with some announcements as a Bunga. So this month we did a couple of different posts. I think the month started with this. Well, when did I post this? 4 weeks ago. Yeah, exactly a month ago. So we launched a Jataka network. The idea behind this is to start collecting some, I guess, Sangat who are on board with, in line with the concept of Jataka and want to see it normalized. This will be kind of a platform where we'll develop over time, but it's to basically start proving there is actual interest in Jataka, and that might come in handy a bit later when we think about some legalization efforts. So do join the network. We set up a Discord server where you can interact with other fellow Jatakais, ask questions about Jataka, all that sort of stuff. If you guys want to do any, let's say you need somebody to hire a van to like transport some livestock somewhere, then you could ask on that Discord channel, and anyone who sort of like is up for the server, they can get in touch with you, and obviously do pay them as well. Let's create some microeconomies essentially with the concept of Jataka, and help normalize it that way. And it will also be a way where we can collect advocacy. So hopefully work with multiple Sikh pages and individuals who are passionate about the subject and want to see it normalized. Come forward, let's start writing these articles, creating this content, and we'll probably do some kind of like international Jataka week type thing where a bunch of pages collaborate together and we all push Jataka content for that whole week, trying to overwhelm the algorithm essentially. We'll do Q&As, that sort of stuff. So that's the whole Jataka network concept. We've got an Instagram page for it as well, so do join, get involved. There's plenty to do. I also posted this Black Diwali is a Dumb Idea. It's quite a popular one, I think one of the most popular posts in a while on the page. Yeah, essentially, look, the Akal Takht Authority are not really an authority, so they don't really have any like legitimacy to give mandates or to do Gala Diwali now, especially Gala Diwali, because it, as a concept itself, is so ridiculous. Like, surely, if you're being targeted, you're being oppressed, that kind of thing, you want to do an extra bright Diwali to show your enemies that we're not going to succumb to depression and the oppression and stuff you're sort of levying upon us. But doing Gala Diwali is a kind of sign of defeat, especially given the sort of like context behind Diwali as well. It's always about like overcoming an evil. So I don't really understand the concept of Gala Diwali being anything in line with what I personally believe Sikhi to be about. I believe what the caste should be doing is the opposite. We should be extra bright Diwali, should be extra Chardigla as a sort of symbol of defiance. Other ones, so we also launched a Vichaar repository via the AnyType app. This is basically a unified view of all of our Vichars, or most of them at least. I've not added everything yet, into one single view where you can come in, you can explore the Vichar repository via this graph view, and just basically read everything in one place. And yeah, you can obviously like zoom around, whatever. So yeah, I encourage you guys to join this. The link to join this is on azadism.com/bunga. It's a downloadable thing to keep on your local copies, that sort of stuff, which makes it secure, and it's hopefully a good app to keep everything in one place. You can always like send us a message afterwards as well if you want us to send you links to any of these things. This one was a pretty controversial post that we did. This one and the next one, I think. No, yeah. Oh, yeah, this one, that one. Yeah, so like a bunch of New Khalistani sort of like protests at a Mandir. I don't think it was the greatest sort of like strategy, but like, it is what it is. People weren't very happy with my sort of response to it. But quite a people were actually quite happy with it as well, so it was what it is. I think like, what we did with this is actually kind of sort of like maybe just burst a little bit of the Neo-Khalistani echo chamber, and so a lot of the Neo-Khalistanis came out to play. But like usual, I've always offered these guys, okay, let's jump on a call and discuss properly. Right, the Instagram comment sections can only like let you do. It's only so good of a medium in which to have discourse. It doesn't really beat jumping on a call and doing Vichaars. And then the next day I had to go to work, so I actually couldn't respond to people. So I locked the comment section, which also is a little bit controversial. But again, I can't keep on top of like the rate of nonsense. So like if you have emotional outbursts, they're not really like good enough counter arguments. Like let's jump on a call, let's hash out the disagreements properly. Also today, like if you guys, anyone here from the comment sections of that post want to debate me on that, on some of the things I've said in this post, more than free to. This is a space and opportunity to do that now. Just let us know in the Q&A section, we'll do, and we can address any more concerns. And then we did the Trump wins. This was for our Substack audience. So subscribe to the Substack. You'll get Vichaars like this directly via email. That was also a pretty popular Substack post, actually. It was one of the most popular Substack posts I think we've ever done on Substack. So again, do recommend it. Well, obviously I'm biased, of course I'm going to recommend it. How to defeat the Khalistan movement. So this is like a rehashing of a old post that I've done before, which has had pretty interesting sort of like response as well. But the idea of this was to rehash it again, and sort of like correct some of the mistakes I made last time, and also to promote the Vichaar repo as well, because we launched the Khalistan-ism section of the Vichaar repo, which will collect all of the kind of ideas, basically just studying the phenomena of Khalistan as part of Sikhi as well. Like people take for granted that Khalistan is indeed a new idea. Like this concept of Sikh sovereignty isn't a new idea. That's been there from the get-go, right from the Guru's times. But specifically the Khalistan idea, Khalistan being an expression of Sikh nationalism, and nationalism itself being a post-colonial construct, that area of it, like our brand of nationalism, that is a new thing. So studying this phenomena I think is important. I don't think it's illegitimate by virtue of being new, but we should recognize it that, okay, well, if we're going to pursue this thing, it should be recognized as a tool rather than a end goal, essentially, right? The end goal, at least for me, is Khalsa Raj, which I think is a broader, wider concept. I think it's more akin to an empire world model than a nation-state world model. And again, these kind of distinctions, a lot of people sort of take for granted. They don't actually recognize them. The YouTube channel, Johnny Harris, I think that's his name is, did a video recently on nationalism. It's a really brilliant video, and I wrote some notes upon it actually, which I'll probably post during the next week. But he really hits the nail on the head by showcasing how new of a concept nationalism is and nation states are. So I really recommend that video, and I'll post my thoughts on it next week as well. So yeah, that's that one. I also released this video on YouTube, the self-determination paradox. You'll be able to see it on this channel. If you go into the channel, and you'll see this video. It's it took me ages to make, to be honest. I actually hired a guy on Fiverr to make it. He did a decent job, but I still wanted it better, so I tweaked it a bit more. So it took a bit of a while. But probably these videos take ages to make, essentially, right? So I don't know how feasible it is to make one of these like regularly. I wish I had the time to do them. But yeah, it's the idea behind this was that the concept of the video was, well, right now Khalistanis rightfully say that we are demanding our right to self-determination, and they do that within India. And then obviously India is going to say, well, no, we want to have national unity, we're not going to let you separate, that sort of stuff, right? Natural. And then what I think is important to consider, especially now, some people disagreed actually, some of these Khalistanis did, some of these prominent pages, when I sent it to them, they're like, oh yeah, we shouldn't be discussing some of this stuff, like this is like 100 years away, it ain't going to matter. And it's like, well, no, you have to study these things and consider these problems now before you get to that stage, because it will inform how exactly you structure your Khalistan. Because if you're going to structure it in a way that doesn't take into account some of these problems, you're going to face those problems and you're going to think, oh damn, why didn't we think of this before? Like, now is the time to do these Vichaars and think about these long-term potential problems that are arising, so we can start putting out those fires before they even start, essentially. So example with this, right? So if Khalistanis are demanding the right to self-determination now within India, what will happen if various minority groups within the Khalistan start demanding their rights to self-determination within Khalistan? Now that's a very interesting question I think we need to address, and I propose as a solution in the video as well. So I don't just highlight the problem, I also offered a solution, and I'm also inviting debate and disagreement on that solution. Let's at least raise the level of discourse to where it needs to be, because just doing sloganeering and begging outside of parliaments, that's only going to get you so far. But now is a time for actual having some self-respect and learning, okay, we need to start doing serious vichars on these topics. That's what this was about. So yeah, watch the video. It's on our YouTube. And then another thing we did, the last couple of things we started this month was, so I personally am starting a business. It's called MissileNet. It's going to be kind of going to be like a directory for all things related to security, justice, and defense. So hopefully start hosting things like jobs, training opportunities, and things also like blog posts I'll start doing as well. So I'll translate a lot of the stuff that I've been gaining by doing Azadism, this Bunga Azaadi page, and I'll also start developing some vichars and stuff, but more secular, more for a non-Sikh audience, and so we can start building that kind of presence in the security, justice, and defense sector, so that when the Sikhs come out the other end of something I'm calling the Dalam Youth pipeline, then this will be nice poised there. This business will be there to provide Sikhs contracts and missions to go on. So yeah, that's a cool little project I'm starting now. I'm progressing. So yeah, I'll keep you guys updated on my personal Instagram page, ranjitsingh.ma, on the progress of that as well. And then the last thing I'll mention is this, the Dalam Youth pipeline. So this is, I've actually written something I'll read out quickly, which I think encapsulates what I'm trying to do here quite well. Let me see, where has it gone? Yeah, okay, so fundamentally, power is the ability to command labour and resources to serve a purpose of your choosing. And in order to do this, you need leverage. Because we right now as a band don't have leverage. This is why protests and stuff don't really work. Like, yeah, they serve some purpose, but the reason why you can't beg your way to Raj is because you don't have anything to bargain with. There's no leverage there. No one has an incentive to listen to you. So you have to build that leverage, right? And if you look through the way of like someone like Henry Kissinger, who viewed the world through this concept of realpolitik, the whole world is sort of like, you can view power through like two different wings. One is the hard power and one is soft power. Hard power is, soft power is the ability to entice, to use incentives, or otherwise rely on not rely on force or the threat of force. It's a much better way to exert influence in my eyes, but it only takes you so far on its own. But it can take you very far, especially in the modern age, where you don't actually have to like build an army and just march it to a capital. You can actually kind of do alternative methods to actually exert influence. And then hard power is more what we saw in history, what we Sikhs had a lot of before. And this is basically then the opposite to soft power, is the use of force or the threat of it to gain leverage or bargaining power in negotiations. At this level, at that level at which I believe the Khalsa should be operating, we should have serious hard power in reserve. And that's what this Dalam Youth pipeline paper is about detailing. Like, how do we get that hard power side of Sikhi? As a Bunga, we also got the soft power parts already being considered, strategized, and progressed behind the scenes. But we're not yet ready to reveal that side of things. Whereas this side of things, especially what I've revealed in the white paper, is now ready to go public, and we need to start building up the advocacy of encouraging more young Sikhs, especially who don't want to have conventional careers in Grist, who don't want to have office jobs, etc., or pursue further education. Instead of them being picked up by like weirdo masans or cults and gangs, let's actually put that energy to good use, that Damoguni energy, and actually direct it in a way that serves humanity and provides security, provides defense and justice, right? Let's gain those skills, the modern skills that we need, because it's from that pipeline then that will set up the outputs of that pipeline. In goes blank slate, Sikhs with no skills, and out comes Khalsa, who are versed in combat, versed in the modern military techniques, and defense techniques, etc., but all in a legal and ethical way, not outside of international law, but inside international law. And it's important we do it inside international law and not become some kind of like Taliban or take inspiration from Al Qaeda and this kind of stupid stuff. It's because you cut your own legs off if you go down that route, right? You vastly hinder your flexibility and how much you can do, and it quickly descends into immorality. It's those kind of like guerrilla warfare tactics are fine for like short sprints. I went to a talk actually back on Thursday. Satnam Singh's from Denmark's talk. It's brilliant, and at the start of this talk he was talking about how like wars back then, they never used to be like these multi-year things. They used to be like done within a couple of days or like a week max kind of thing. Like you meet on the battlefield, you sort it out, and then you're done, right? But nowadays, like it's very different, especially like this kind of like long, drawn-out guerrilla warfare type scenarios we have, where you're shooting people from like miles away, that kind of thing. You're sitting in a military base, like just dropping bombs and all that kind of stuff. Like that's a very different way of warfare, and we need to be cognizant that the battlefild has changed, and we need to change with it. So yeah, this is a very different method to that kind of like Taliban-like inspiration. It's more about getting inspired by the modern conception of the private military security company. I think those models are more in line with how I think the castle should be organised, and I think it's more effective as well for the long term. And we can basically enable a generation of Sikhs to emerge that are just immersed in the security, defence and justice sector. And that in itself will help build the castle's hard power, which you can use in conjunction with the castle's soft power, which will develop. And then both those things together, a good competency in both those areas, will therefore then allow us to have the leverage I was talking about, have this bargaining power and negotiations. We don't have to beg outside of parliaments. We can sit inside the parliaments as equals, if not superiors, to some of these governments and etc. to actually get our demands met. So yeah, that's the kind of motivation behind this Dalamud pipeline stuff. It's a big thing. So I do encourage you guys to share it with people who are interested, get involved. We're going to be doing a bit more planning work in the upcoming weeks to actually start operationalizing and forming the tactics of how exactly we're going to promote this advocacy efforts and provision things as well. So keep an eye on this space. It will be good. Okay, cool. So that was basically the monthly catch up. Let me just make sure I've not missed anything. Yeah, I think that was everything I need to catch up with this month. So that's all we did this month. Hopefully, over the course of next month, I'll have more stuff we can share with you guys that we've done. I think this last month was particularly busy, but yeah, that's that. So, Ajit Singh, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Hanji, I can hear you. If you're in the chat, please let us know if you can hear Ajit Singh when he starts presenting. Otherwise, this will be awkward. But okay, I'm gonna share the slides now. How'd you go on, Ajit?
There's a bit of a time lag between us and the YouTube channel.
Oh yeah, Tiga. Yeah, no worries. Let me see if I can get. It might be blank the screen right now. Let me stop sharing and share again. Does it come up, Ajit?
No, it's still a black screen.
Oh, hold on then. Live Darbar.
Oh well.
Oh, okay,
it's
got it.
slightly behind, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, it should be coming up now. All right, let me get your slides up. So if you could turn him up, that'd be good. Okay, yeah, I'll try and turn his mic up a bit. All right, Ajit, can you see it now?
Yep, I can see it. All good?
Yeah.
Is my voice better for everybody as well?
Yeah, I've turned it on my side, so you should be better. Yeah, let us know in the chat if he's better now. Go ahead, Ajit Singh. You can carry on. If he is quiet, I'll adjust it in the settings behind the scene. You just carry on.
Yeah, okay. Waheguru Ji ka Khalsa,
Waheguru Ji ki Fateh.
So, my name's Ajit Singh. I'm a graduate energy analyst, graduate last year in data science, and I've been involved with the Bunga since it started really. So yeah, helping out Ranjit with his manifesto,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's culminated into these monthly. They feel like seminars, right? But yeah, they're pretty cool. Yeah, this week or this month rather, I'll be focusing on energy markets, and this is an interesting one because energy isn't like any other commodity. The instant it's produced is the instant it must be consumed. There's a very small window from where you can store it. So batteries can store electricity for the region of 4 to 8 hours usually. So it's not something like grain that can be stored between seasons. And so the dynamics of energy markets are slightly different for the commodities. And then I'll be talking about how Sikh/Azadi's principles can be applied to energy markets, and how energy markets work today. And yeah, the picture you see on the screen is Guru Haraiji in his garden, which is called Guru Gabag. And yeah, it just goes back to the point about environmental stewardship and thinking about Sarvat Tapala, because I think often when we're doing good tasks and we say Sarvat Tapala, we always think about people and don't tend to think about other animals and the world in general. So it's a good point to start on, I think.
Yeah, brilliant, good point. Yeah.
Yeah, if we go to the next slide, which is the agenda.
Yeah.
And so we'll go through the importance of the energy sector. So why should we worry about it? Like, why is it relevant? And also the opportunity of the energy sector. I think it's a really good area to get into. There's a lot of investment going into it. I'll talk about how Sikhi relates to the environment/energy from a sort of higher level in terms of how an energy system should look. Because I think we can all agree that Sikhi says that the environment should be saved, right? I think we can all agree on that. And then I'll talk about how energy markets work today, particularly the UK, because that's where we're based. And then finally designing an energy system based on Sikh principles.
Yeah, cool.
For those who aren't based in the UK, I will talk a little bit about North America as well, just so you get a bit of an idea on how they can look different.
Nice. Okay, next slide.
Next slide, which is Sikhi and the environment/energy. I think I included some slide animations there, so you might have to.
Oh, is it? No, I saved it. I saved your PowerPoint as a PDF and put it in.
Okay, no worries.
Oh, damn! You should have told me you had the animations.
It was for dramatic effect, but I think we can go without it.
Yeah, go okay.
So let's start from the very basics, right? What is the most fundamental principle of Sikhi? And at this point, I was going to open the floor to you guys and ask what you guys think it is, but I think we'd all agree that it is it, right? That fundamentally we are all one thing, and the universe is comprised of one thing, disguised as many different things.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good point to start on when it comes to the environment, because as I mentioned earlier, we tend to interpret that one to mean one in every human being, but that actually manifests itself into the physical world as well, and animals and the oceans, etc. And so there's a really good quote from Gurbani here, which is "Tu ape srish sajke tud ape hi rang manya. Tu ape pambara phul tu ape phul tu rukha. Tu ape pani tu ape tarti tu ape tripavar tani." And it goes back to the point of seeing ourselves in everything, not just including humans, but bumblebees, flowers, fruits in the tree, the water, the desert, ocean, and the pond. And I think it's really beautiful, and it really encapsulates the point of environmental stewardship. And then to the left, I got this off the Azadism page, but it's Sab Gobind hai, Gobind bin nahi koi. And yeah, God is everything. God is everything. Without God, there is nothing at all. So I think we can all agree on those very fundamental Sikh principles. And it's important to distinguish that everything below that is an interpretation of how that should be applied in an energy system. And so I pointed out 4 key tenets or pillars of how an energy system should be based on what it should be based on. And so we've got decentralization / self-reliance. So having an energy market that isn't based around one central generator or producer, because that system is also very prone to failure, and it's also very unequal. Secondly, sustainable. So like I mentioned earlier, it should take into account the environmental health of all creatures and not just view them as commodities. Thirdly, we should also look at an energy system that is affordable / available to everyone. And then finally, a energy system based on free market and economic freedom principles. And I won't go into too much about how Sikhi relates to the free market, because that's the whole premise of Azadism. But Ranjit, do you want to add a bit to that?
Yeah. Obviously, a lot of this project started off with my sort of like ambition to promote free market principles and libertarian ideas, put them through a sort of like measuring stick using Gurbani and Itihas, and then producing something to offer the Sangat that, okay, so there's something of value here. Let's pick this up and like use it. So yeah, that's a lot of the premise of Azadism. You're right. I think just quickly on. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so that's basically just what to say about that. So yeah, it would be ideal essentially, right? That we might discuss various like energy systems and ways countries do at the moment, but we set these as our ideals because we want to rely less on a single point of failure, and we want to rely less on the benevolence and the competency of a central planning authority, a government, right? And that's what a free market system should, in theory, do. It makes it less reliant on the government and more reliant on, or less reliant on the government and more decentralized of risk, essentially, and make it more fair and accessible, as you mentioned as well. So that's the kind of principles we want to do to try and de-risk energy and centralizing it into one small group of central planners.
Yeah, it's a really good way of putting it. And one key question I had with regards to like designing an energy system based on Sikhi or free market principles is that how can we base it on free market principles, but also simultaneously prioritize environmental stewardship without government intervention? Which I have a few suggestions on how to do this. So we'll go into those later on.
Brilliant.
But next slide, which is, I guess, the background of the energy sector and how important it is. So on the left-hand side, we have a graph showing, so a bit of context, McKinsey produces a yearly tech trends outlook report where they report on the 10 or 15 highest technological innovations. And we've got industrializing machine learning, advanced connectivity, trust architectures, which is kind of similar to blockchain. And then we've got future of clean energy, future of mobility. And then what they do is they rank them based on both interest, innovation, and investment. And in this case, investment is the size of the circle.
Sorry, what's interest? What does that interest mean? Is it like actual like generic like interest, like passion people have for certain things? Or is it
yes, I think the way McKinsey quantify that interest is both public interest, so the amount of Google hits that these things have, but also in terms of public interest. So I think it's like the number of patents for each of these.
Right, okay.
Yeah, there's a few things that go into each of these scores. But as you can see, future of clean energy ranks the highest in terms of interest, and in terms of the investment to the sides of the circle, it's probably the biggest too. Wow. And it's also worth mentioning that these circles aren't like mutually exclusive. So applied AI and quantum technologies can also be applied to the future of clean energy. But I guess the point of this graph is just to show that it's one of the top technological trends that has a lot of money going into it. So it's really worthwhile field to look into. And so I picked out three factors here. So significant near-term value at stake. So that value 2.4 trillion, that is the amount of annual investment we're going to need from 2031 to 2035. And And I think the total investment we're going to need from now to 2050 is above 10 trillion. So yeah, a lot of money going
Wow.
into it. And then that can be broken down into power generation, power grid, and energy storage.
Hmm.
Another reason why the energy sector is important is because there's going to be increasing power demand. So from now to 2050, we're going to anticipate a 3.3 times increase in power demand. I think that's according to the International Energy Agency. And then for us to achieve net zero, we need to add 3 times the infrastructure expansion compared to how much infrastructure was built in the First and Second World War.
Oh wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, there's a lot of things that need to be built
Yeah.
essentially. And then finally, the need for sustainable energy sources. So we've got nuclear fusion, SMRs, which are like small nuclear reactors. Hydrogen. So there's a big potential for a hydrogen economy, and hydrogen emerging as a globally used commodity. And we can also anticipate an 80% share of global demand in 2050 to be generated by renewables.
Right. Okay.
This little triangle shape here, um, it's called the energy trilemma, which is the best way to describe it is how governments try to meet 3 different energy criteria. One being energy security. So, is the energy we're getting, is it secure? Is it at risk of being, I don't know, taken over or destroyed by another country? So,
Hmm.
for example, an example would be the Russian gas pipelines.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah. That's a good example.
energy, yeah, the energy affordability would be: is the energy we're producing cheap? Is that energy source actually feasible for consumers? And then the third one being energy sustainability. So, is this energy source good for the environment? And
Hmm.
what policymakers are trying to do is balance all three. And that's quite a hard thing to do because if you look at the example of wind power, so in terms of energy sustainability and energy affordability, it's very good. But in terms of energy security, it's not great because it's very prone to weather conditions. And then another example would be a gas turbine, which would be very good in energy security and energy affordability, but not very good in energy sustainability. So it's always a balance trying to get all three.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then
Really good.
go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say like, a couple of points actually on this slide because the first one is the visual on the left is really good because what we can do
Mm.
actually, I mean, I'm surprised AI, applied AI, is not more further to the right on the interest score. But
Yeah,
as you mentioned, it will be interesting to look into how exactly this McKenzie
I
guys.
mean this is taken from last year's tech
Oh, really?
outlook report. I
Right.
think I think for this year it's even more further to the right because
Okay.
like generative AI that was what released in 2022, late 2022. So I don't
Okay.
think
Okay.
this graph fully accounts for like how popular that's become.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
It'd be good to actually keep a tab then on these what are they? A research institute, I guess.
McKinsey, no, they're a strategy consulting firm.
Oh, okay, okay, cool. Yeah, send me a link
Yeah,
to that because
quite
it'd be good to
big.
keep a tab on their outputs and stuff.
Mm.
And another thing that's good about this graph is that if you look at the bottom left, that's basically where we as a band to start making punts on. Um, so like some of these things now they're kind of becoming more well established fields, and our impact as a band, we should have lots of impact here. We should be in these industries 100%. But these are now already sort of like in play. But the things on the bottom left, they're still in development, right? And they can start becoming in play in the long term, in the medium term. So we just need to start figuring out, okay, what do we think is going to be big in the next 20 years, next 30 years, next 50 years, next 60, 100 years, right? And then we need to start putting our children into the right degrees, education and stuff to actually become experts and industry leaders for those fields. So some serious study is now needed on some of these bottom left industries like future space technologies, next generation software developments, quantum technologies especially, right? We need to start basically
Yeah.
create a culture within the band that these might be the industries of the future, and therefore here's in our interest to study these things and get our people there first, and then lead that industry. Because now we're just playing catch up on all these things. We're just trailing along behind what others are saying, making decisions on our behalf. It really should be grantees, like actual gyanis and stuff, who are informing like AI ethics discussions. But we're nowhere near the table. And the reason why is because we don't provide any value there. We're too busy trying to figure out whether we can put like a shader on or off in the shower or not. Like we should be having discussions on, okay, well, how does Sikhi apply to AI ethics? How can we add value there? So we're at risk of missing the boat with some of this. We can still obviously do it if we get out together, but that's how we should be thinking about charts like this. Another thing I've noted down was you mentioned that they're anticipating a 3.3 times increase in demand for power by 2050. What kind of things actually factor in to that increase? Like, how do we know what is driving that increase? Is it like population?
So I think you can break it down into like developed and developing countries.
Yeah.
So for developed countries, that power increase will come from an increase in electric vehicles. And you could also factor in things like hydrogen electrolysis, because in order to make hydrogen, you need to power that using electricity.
Yeah.
And if we're anticipating hydrogen to be a really big, commodity in the future, you're going to need a lot more electricity via electrolysis, right? And then you can also break that down via developing countries. So like countries like India and China, as they're going through the social development pyramid, they're going to use more energy per capita. I think that's probably the largest aspect of that 3.3 increase. But I think twofold, it's like improving socio-economic conditions, and then secondly, electrifying everything.
It's really very interesting what you mentioned here about the difference in the developing country and the developed country, or so-called developing. That distinction is very important. There's a concept called I think we've discussed this before actually, carbon colonialism, where essentially a lot of the developing countries have already developed. Developed countries have already developed, right? And they went through this whole period of using like dirtier energy sources like coal and all that kind of fossil fuels, that kind of thing. And now they're in their relative luxury. Now a lot of people are saying, oh, what about the environment? We need to go into like renewables, windmills, solar panels, that kind of stuff, right? But they can do that because these countries are relatively wealthier, richer, so they have a bit more of and the population can demand it as well, right? But if you're out in Africa or like Asia somewhere, you're just gonna have to burn like biomass or whatever because you're trying to get by, kind of thing, isn't it? So the last thing on your mind is trying to be sustainable and like make solar panels. It's then the carbon colonialism aspect is the argument where okay, well now the developed countries are trying to impose their developed standards on the developing countries by, for example, like barring their use of like coal or biomass or fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are trying to reduce it, even though they've already benefited from it. And the idea is that you want to get these developing countries out of the developing stage faster, so then they also have the same luxuries of starting to demand more expensive technologies and sources of energy. So it's a really interesting concept. And
you also got to take into account the fact that people say coal is dirty. It's a fuel for backwards people. But at the end of the day, coal lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty in China.
Billions even, yeah.
And no other fuel could have done that other than coal. And so I think we just need to appreciate the fact that fossil fuels have got us from very low living standards to very high living standards.
Yeah.
And it's kind of naive for us to think that we should expect developing countries to adopt our moral standards when it comes to clean energy.
Yeah.
So when you hear people like Greta Thunberg saying, no, you shouldn't, everything should be solar powered or wind powered, it doesn't really take into account how countries develop, and it's a very naive view, basically.
It's another really important lesson in this. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, just going back to your point on the left-hand side of the slide, right? These 15 tech trends. I think it's really important that we establish ourselves in all of these, because these are going to be easily the fields of the future. And any career based on these will, I think, bring about great financial rewards, but also greater political power, which is what Azaadi is about, right? So,
yeah, good point.
Yeah,
good point.
essentially it.
Just actually relating to that, what you just said as well. Like if we as a band like knew about the or made a good prediction about the prominence of like electric cars and this kind of stuff, and the move towards renewable technologies and stuff like this, it would have been like good for the band to start investing in things like nickel and cobalt and silver and these kind of things, right? Because that's now what's driving like these batteries and like solar panel technologies, etc. Is like these base minerals. So again, this is what the financial benefit is as a band, to recognize some of these trends and get ahead of them, because it can also increase the wealth, and then by virtue of that wealth, we can then increase our despond and increase our capacity to make impactful change in the planet as well. So again, we need to start looking at things.
Yeah, very good point. And I think it's also worth mentioning the fact that the extraction of these precious metals is in of itself a very dirty process. The mining of those elements requires displacing tons of earth to get that. So I was watching a video actually about how solar and wind, the materials that go into making those, they're actually not very sustainable as well. So I can kind of see the point about people who say we're just replacing one set of environmental problems with another set of environmental problems. It's not as clear cut as we're going from dirty fuel to clean fuel, basically.
Yeah, that's good. It's all nuanced, really, isn't it? Like, and the trick is finding out, okay, where does that nuance lie? Like, where can we find benefit from it? That sort of thing. I mean, even this point now about we mentioned about this moving from like so-called dirty to cleaner fuel sources. I mean, everything's progress, right? Like we should like thank coal for its purpose that it sort of like did during its time. But just because something is working for one period of time doesn't mean it's going to be useful or appropriate for all periods of time. And that's a kind of general principle we can apply to like many things. Like something like I was reading a dissertation today actually by one of the Bunga members, and it was a really good dissertation. And in there it talks about the idea of armed struggle being used during the 80s and 90s. And it's like, some methods are appropriate for some times, and then they might not be appropriate for other times. That there's many different ways to do to progress things, and even like politically, economically, financially, personally, any sort of ways. You've got to be adaptable. The ones who adapt are the ones who survive. The ones who don't adapt, and that's basically the core lesson of like just Mother Nature evolution. Anyway, it's all about adaptation. And as long as you
absolutely
as long as you have like solid principles, you can have fluid techniques. And I think the gurus themselves embodied this. The same Sikhi was running through all the gurus, but the way they expressed Sikhi then evolved over time to adapt with the circumstances they were in. I think that's a great core lesson that we as a band now should heed, rather than getting stuck and trying to just blindly mimic what things we did in the past purely for the nostalgia sense, rather than actually doing this is actually practical and to allow Sikhi to survive for the next 1,000 years.
It reminds me of Bruce Lee quote where he talks about water, and he says the power in water is not its brute strength, but its ability to persist over time. And so when you look at the erosion of rocks from water, right? If you looked at it over a year, you'd see no difference. But after hundreds of thousands of millions of years, it eventually makes its way through.
Exactly.
There's power in fluidity and being flexible, as opposed to just being rigid, which is really, really true. Yeah,
it requires a bit of sage. I mean, obviously we don't want to wait 100 million years to get things happening, though, isn't it? Which is the trade-off. The time bit is the trade-off, isn't it? So it's like trying to find that balance, but whilst not screwing things up. But that is it. That is what Rajniti is. It's finding these balance, playing these games, doing that bit of jiu-jitsu. All right, should we go next slide?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, let's go for it. Okay, so this slide talks about how energy markets work today, and we're just going to look at the UK as an example first. But I think it kind of applies to how European markets work in general, and some of the principles can be applied to North America and other parts of the world. But if we talk about the physical operation of an energy market, you can break it down into generation, transmission, and distribution. So the generators are the assets that generate electricity. So these could be wind turbines, solar panels, a gas turbine, could be a nuclear power station. So that's shown on the very left there. And once the electricity is generated from that, they then go into the transmission grid via a transformer. And then from the transmission grid, it will then feed into a distribution grid, which will go towards our houses, so the end users. The best way to think about the transmission network is it's kind of like the motorways for electricity distribution. So very high voltage, very high speed. And the best way to think about the distribution network is the A roads and B roads. So a bit slower, a bit of lower voltage, and obviously safer for us. But that's essentially the crux of an energy system. You've got the generators, and you've got the suppliers on the other end, and they're fed by the transmission network. And the graph on the bottom refers specifically to the UK power markets. So in the UK, there's 4 main power markets. You've got the capacity market, wholesale market, balancing mechanism, and ancillary service markets. The most prevalent one is the wholesale market, which is where generators and suppliers can freely trade and buy and sell energy. The capacity market it was implemented by the UK government back in 2013, and it essentially rewards power plants for providing the potential to generate electricity, but not actually generating electricity. And the reason for that is because in a high stress event where, let's say, everyone's using electricity, it could be at 5 p.m. when everyone's using the kettles or whatever. If there's not enough supply to meet demand, it will lead to a system-wide blackout. And to kind of protect against that scenario, the UK implemented a capacity market where it pays generators to be on standby to provide during those times, but they may or may not actually generate electricity. You can think of it as like a safety mechanism or an insurance, essentially. And then the balancing mechanism is, if you think of the wholesale market, it will balance the electricity system 1 hour before delivery.
Right.
But from 1 hour before delivery to the actual delivery, that's when the balancing mechanism comes in, because it recognizes that there could be last minute changes. You're never going to be able to predict a supplier or a consumer is going to turn on their lighting, or they're going to use more electricity than they need. So you need that last minute balancing mechanism, which will just top up supply or cut off power stations to make supply exactly equal demand. And then the last step is ancillary service markets. So without going too technical, the whole transmission network or grid operates at a frequency of 50 hertz, and it needs to operate at 50 hertz, otherwise equipment's going to get damaged, the lines will overheat, etc., etc. And so this market incentivizes energy generation to keep the system frequency at 50 hertz. So it's more of like a engineering safety mechanism.
Sure.
So yeah, those are the 4 markets, and then it's all governed by something called a national system operator. And they kind of have, you can call it a monopoly, but they regulate these markets, and they also create something called the merit order, which I'll go into after this. But I think the main takeaway from the slide is generators produce electricity, suppliers sell electricity to consumers, and the consumers, that should be a blank cell. It should just say consumers. But yeah, next slide.
Yeah, just quickly on this. Well, actually, you might mention it in the next slide, actually. Just quickly on this, actually, then. This essentially is a problem set. So, as from an Azaadi
I'm sorry. One sec. My fire alarm's gone off.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Don't worry. So from an Azaadi's perspective, what we're trying to do is basically trying to avoid centralization of power where we can, where it's appropriate. Now, some things are not appropriate, especially not in the short term, like things like national defence, policing, justice and courts. These things you probably want to keep having a centralized government for, at least in the short term, essentially. I do have arguments why we can decentralize further. But let's say in the short term of Azadism, we want to have the government to do the least amount of things possible. Now, this energy generation, this whole energy market overseen by the government, is a very important aspect of the economy, and we therefore want to avoid relying on the government for doing this. And the reason is that given the track record of governments throughout history, they aren't always the most moral agents, nor the most competent agents either. So we are relying on the benevolence and competency of the government to manage this accurately or sufficiently to meet our needs. And most Western developed countries probably do this fine most of the time. But it gets worrying when, like, with things like the rise of like fascism and that kind of stuff, like authoritarianism rising steadily. Like, what happens then if a government starts deciding, okay, well, let's cut off power to all the factories or regions, like factories producing a particular good or service, or a region that isn't as compliant to us. Those kind of things we need to start factoring in, because if you have that single point of failure, it also becomes a very big target for enemy forces as well. So let's say we had a Sikh state and we had a one institution, one building, whatever, that manages all the energy stuff. If that gets hit by like a missile or something, then we're all screwed then, essentially. So you want to avoid having these single points of failures, both internally from like a sociological perspective and also like from a defense perspective, etc. as well. So here's a problem. Anyone here who's listening can try and attempt to solve. How do we decentralize this? Like, if you figure out a good solution to avoiding this current system that we're in, then maybe you'll win like a Bunga Azaadi Nobel Prize or something, right? So this is a problem set. I mean, we might have some ideas. Adjit might give some ideas in the course of this presentation. I'm suspecting it's sort of the lines of like localizing energy generation. Maybe that's down the route. But yeah, Ajit Singh, are you back?
I'm back, yeah.
Yeah. Everything good? No fire?
No fire. It might be some carbon monoxide, so if I pass out halfway through, you'll know.
Okay. Make the last few moments count then, yeah.
Yeah. But no, really, really good points. I'm going to go into it later on about how we can base the energy system on Sikh principles, and one of those for sure is decentralization, so making sure there's no single points of failure, and it's not reliant on one central entity. And I think it's important to say that the European energy markets have largely gone towards that direction.
Really?
So the UK energy system used to be one big public company, and then in the 1990s they introduced the whole side of retail markets to make everything more competitive. But again, it's still not perfect today, right? We can make it better. But yeah, if we move on to the next slide, which is actually looking at economics and how that ties into the electricity price.
Brilliant.
And so we've got the intersection of supply and demand in the merit order stack determines the electricity price today. So I'm looking at the top graph in the middle. So the blocks represent the supply from the different power plants in a country. So I don't know, let's say this is the UK, right? It has X amount of renewables followed by nuclear. It has quite a large amount of coal, which isn't really representative of the UK, but it's got gas and oil as well. And what the system operator does is it orders each of these blocks in order of their marginal costs, which is why gas and oil are on the far right.
Right.
And the idea is we always want to meet supply with firstly the cheapest technology, followed by the second most, followed by the third most, and so on. And so we only use the most expensive ones when the demand is really high. And so the blocks make up the supply curve, and then the demand is the blue line here. And at any point during the day, the demand curve will intersect with the supply curve, and that will set the market clearing price, which is the electricity price we pay. I think it's important to mention that this isn't 100% the electricity price, because the electricity price will add a network tariff fee onto this market clearing price, which is the cost to use a national grid.
Yeah, they would they?
And and then it also adds on taxes and other stuff.
Yeah.
But this is the free market price aspect of the electricity price.
Right.
And then if you look at the bottom right graph, that shows the load profile, which is the electricity demand during one day. And as you can see, during night and early mornings, the electricity demand is very low. And if you can imagine on the top graph, the demand curve is further to the left. And in that case, it will intersect supply, let's say at nuclear, right?
Yeah.
And hence, the electricity price at night is a lot lower.
Yeah.
Because of demand. And then if you look at the load profile graph for 6 p.m., which is when there's peak demand, in that case, the demand blue curve will be further to the right and it might intersect oil. And that's when the electricity price will be higher. Hope that's self-explanatory. And then in the bottom left, 2 graphs, that just shows the impact of renewables on the electricity price. And you can see that country A, which has a larger share of renewables, it's able to meet the demand requirements at a lower price because you have a higher percentage or higher proportion of blocks with a lower marginal cost. And the reason that renewables have a lower marginal cost is because they essentially produce energy for free, right? The wind that we get, we don't need to. There's no charge on it. There's no fuel cost.
So like once it's set up, it's sort of set up, and then
once it's set up, there's very minimal running costs.
Right.
You know? Same with solar as well. But obviously with the country B, coal and gas, you're going to need a lot of energy to. You're going to need fuel to run those power plants, and that is going to cost money, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is where supply meets demand is what sets the free market electricity price, and the higher the amount of renewables you have in your country, that should reduce the electricity price.
Okay. Cool.
So next slide.
Yeah. Just quickly, is there any? I'm pretty sure this happened in the UK, but you get price controls added on as well, right? So there's like minimum, maximum prices being set by the government.
Yeah. So 2 years ago when Russia invaded Ukraine, the gas prices went through the roof.
Right.
And so imagine that fourth bar there, that gas price is like double what it is there, right? And so that means that during high demand periods of the year, the electricity price is actually very, very high. And to kind of help out with consumers not paying too much for their bills, the UK government would pay those gas plants themselves. So I think the price controls came in when the price of gas went through the roof. But it's also worth mentioning that it's a pay as clear market,
right,
which means that renewables, nuclear, coal will all get paid the same price as what gas is getting paid, because gas sets the market clearing price, but renewables still get paid that price. So it means that if you're a renewable asset like wind or solar, and you're generating at the same time that a gas plant is generating at, you're going to make a lot of money.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because if you look at the renewables bar, right?
Yeah.
Their marginal cost is very low, but the price they're getting, which is the market clearing price, is very higher. It's much higher than what their costs are.
That's wild. Okay. I think just generally, like a general economic principle is economists sort of like have they rarely agree on most things, but one of the few things that economists do have a consensus on is price controls. It's generally not preferred to have price controls. What you want to do is the market sort of like reach equilibrium price on its own. So yes, if there's some kind of like external event that does happen and it forces prices to skyrocket because I don't know supply is being drastically restricted, well, what happens when the price goes up is you start incentivize new providers to come into the market and then resolve those shortages and produce that product, and that wholly brings back the supply up to meet the demand, and then therefore you get back to the equilibrium price. That's what happens generally. But when you have price controls being inserted, either maximum price or minimum prices, you end up with like shortages and surpluses. It's a very similar thing that we saw during the Kisan Morcha as well. Not just Kisan Morcha, like just Indian agriculture in general. Because we have minimum prices for things, there is an incentive to like be efficient with the resources you're using. You're just going to keep producing as much like rice as you can because you're always guaranteed the price. So what the government end up doing is they just keep buying all this rice they don't actually need, and you have all this rice just stocked in warehouses and just rots away. They can't even get rid of. And that's a direct consequence of a price control issue. So even in this energy market as well, I think adding some these artificial price controls is very risky. You risk being extremely inefficient. But I get why they do this. It's because they want to have that security that there's always some energy there to meet the demands. Because if you can't meet energy demands, that's pretty drastic. So hence why, again, we need to find a solution to this. Is the market elastic enough? Does it respond fast enough to shocks in supply? How do we resolve that? Okay.
Cool. Next slide. So at this point, I try and tie everything we put into how an energy system based on Sikh principles should look like.
Nice.
So again, taking the four pillars, so decentralization, sustainability, being affordable, and economic freedom together. And we're using it to answer this question, which is how to create an energy system based on free market principles / Sikhi that also prioritizes environmental stewardship without government intervention. And I've highlighted 2 ways we can do that. And the first one is essentially what the free market does, which is consumer demand drives change. So that's based on market. So in a free market, businesses tend to respond to consumer preferences. And if consumers prioritize environmentally friendly energy, companies have an incentive to provide cleaner options. And it just goes to show the importance of bhakti and just the general spiritual development of a society. As they develop spiritually and embody the principle of Sarvata Pala, they will understand that they want to procure their energy from sources that don't affect wildlife adversely. And then it's also corporate social responsibility. So companies that adopt environmentally friendly practices tend to enhance their reputation. So that's a further incentive for them to do that. Briefly about property rights. So I guess the idea is that strong property rights enable individuals or groups or charities to take legal action against polluters for damages, which again creates a deterrent for environmental harm.
That last one there probably the strongest one, because then you can only rely so much on people's sort of like how do I say, like their cultural sort of standard towards this. Like, how did the culture respond to being environmentally friendly? Like, more developed societies would naturally trend towards that because they have the education, etc. Right? But just relying on that alone probably not enough. But something like property rights and legal frameworks, by actually saying, okay, well, no, you producing this much pollutants into the air is actually a violation of my property rights. It's a violation of the non-aggression principle, and therefore there's grounds there to then penalise. So, something like a carbon tax or a carbon fine. It might be a pretty good solution. But so long as we can prove in a court of law that this X amount of emissions does cause Y amount of harm, and then how do we punish for that?
And going back to this idea of a carbon tax, I think it was one of the outcomes of the most recent COP meeting, which is the United Nations Climate Conference. It was last week in Azerbaijan. And they were talking about setting up a global carbon trading scheme, so allowing different countries to trade carbon. And it also goes back to the point about how we expect developing countries to just use solar panels. But the way we get around that is we we set up investment funds or like pools of capital, which is developed countries put their resources together, and then they send that to developing countries, who are able to then improve their energy networks to incorporate renewables. And at the minute, I think they promised to deliver $300 billion worth of funds. But there's been a bit of an uproar because the developing countries don't think that's enough, and rightly so. And that was an interesting takeaway from that.
Yeah,
and then the second aspect of developing an energy system based on Sikh principles is decentralized energy networks.
Yeah.
So again, it goes back to the idea of self-reliance, and I think it's mentioned in the comments as well. It's one of Guru Gobind Singh Ji's 52 hukams as well. Really, really good point. The idea of decentralized energy production is that it enables local ownership, and if each house becomes their own generator, I guess that creates a culture of them taking ownership of how they generate their energy and whether it's on clean resources. Because it tends to be that if you sign if you get a tariff with a company, you're kind of hidden away from the energy generation aspect. Whereas if it's in your house, you can kind of see your own impact on the environment, right?
Yeah.
Secondly, we can talk about peer-to-peer energy trading.
Yeah.
So let's say my house A, then your house, Manjeet, house B. You need energy for, I don't know, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. tomorrow. I have a surplus of energy because I live in, I don't know, Saudi Arabia, right? Actually, let's not say Saudi Arabia because that's a bit of a logistical challenge. But let's say I live in the south of England and I have a lot of solar.
Yeah.
I can then transport that to you at a price, and then we're essentially helping each other balance their energy needs.
Nice.
And then thirdly, we can talk about reducing energy loss via transmission networks. Because at the minute, we get a lot of our wind from Scotland, but on the way here, we lose a lot of that energy through the transmission network.
Yeah.
But if everything's decentralized, if I'm getting my energy from, I don't know, the power grid in Coventry, there's going to be a lot less of a loss associated with that. And I think that goes back to Sikhi principles in the sense of conserving energy, recycling, and producing less waste, right? Yeah, I think those are the two main mechanisms of how we can create an energy system based on Sikh principles. So if we go to the next slide, there's like a nice visual on how it looks compared to what it is now.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So the way we can create a clean, decentralized energy network is by using blockchain.
Okay.
And we can think of blockchain as a distributed or decentralized ledger. A ledger being a record of transactions or a record of information. And blockchain allows peer-to-peer energy transactions without a intermediary, like an energy company that will just sit and charge both parties and make money.
Right.
And so if you look at look on the left-hand side, we've got the gas plant, which is a generator, the nuclear plant. And the residential homes and local businesses are very, what's the word? Their supply is very contingent on whether the nuclear power plant produces energy or not. It's a very prone to failure.
Right.
And then on the right, you've got solar farms, battery storage, wind turbines, all connected to the local energy grid.
Yeah.
Which makes it a lot less prone to failure. There's no single point of failure.
Yeah, I suppose the whole battery aspect of this is pretty important as well, like developing the technology to actually store energy, because you can produce a lot, but there's no like meaningful way to store it for later. That's kind of the bottleneck with a lot of this. You can produce as much as you want, but how do you store it? How do you transmit it? Yeah.
I haven't mentioned that earlier, but I think it's a good point to mention it, that renewables kind of go hand in hand with batteries. Without batteries, the ability to use renewables is very inhibited.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's no solar available at night, and so you need some sort of storage mechanism to be able to use that.
Yeah.
And so I think in general we need a lot more investment in battery technology.
Yeah, there's a question. What's that middle thing on the distributed future diagram? Is the thing in the middle?
According to the website, it's like a central control unit, which I think it's like a smart grid. So it kind of predicts using AI when to dispatch and when to supply energy.
Okay, okay. So I just replaced the
Yeah.
role of the government essentially there. Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. My fire alarm's gone off again. Can you hear it or
No, no, I
is
can't
it
hear it.
okay?
Yeah,
Okay, cool. I'll carry on.
yeah, do it through the
All right.
phone.
So going through each of these points one by one. So with regards to peer-to-peer energy trading, blockchain allows energy producers to sell excess energy directly to consumers without intermediaries like utilities. It also enables something called smart contracts, which allows energy to be dispatched based on like an automated algorithm, which is a pretty efficient way of doing it.
Yeah.
We also can allow for community energy projects, and this kind of goes back to your missile idea, Ranjit. So it could be that a community has a similar ethos in how their energy should be generated, and therefore that energy system will reflect that, right?
Yeah.
And again, there could be another community that really advocates for renewables, and hence they design a system that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just allows communities to generate, share, and manage their energy independently. Blockchain can also create energy credits and tokens, which enables sort of energy trading in the long term.
Yeah.
And yeah, decentralized energy. So
Yeah.
no single point of failure is the main takeaway. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's my view on how an energy system based on Sikh principles should look like. Again, it's not foolproof. There will be ways we can improve this, but I think with the looking at the 15 trends that McKinsey reported, we're using quite a few here. You know, AI, blockchain, essentially. So yeah, that concludes my presentation. So thank you all for listening.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Edu, for presenting this. Yeah, there's quite a few things. Like, I think generally, like, a lot of this needs more like definitely more study, more fleshing out. There's a very good primer essentially to give us an idea of like the whole industry as it stands right now and potential avenues of exploration to go further. I mean, so if anyone's listening and they're interested in these kind of topics, I want to contribute their expertise here. If you also work in energy or got a background in this, do come forward. Let's do some of these vichars, produce content, like even like picking some of these things here, like how can blockchains be used to basically help us out with this energy markets, that sort of thing. Like, let's produce these vichars, let's do these things, and produce these plans. Because again, there's no point doing all this in the hopes that, okay, after a state we'll just figure it all out. No, let's start doing these things now, right? And even these kind of knowledge as well could help us improve existing country and existing systems. So it's not always about let's do it and then archive it. No, you can actually start implementing some of these things now and advocate for them, form the networks, form the partnerships outside of the community as well. Like, who's solving these problems? How can we go there and participate in the solving of these problems? We've really got to stop being so insular as a community. And that will really bottleneck us if we remain just inward looking all the time, just fighting over like silly things. But yeah, very good presentation, Ajit Singh. There's quite a few avenues of exploration to continue with. Yeah, and this idea of localizing energy, I think that is along the lines of what an Azaadi solution may look like. Definitely would love to have that more fleshed out. And especially regarding this kind of like missileization, the missile system, and the star model. Like, yeah, each star would have its own capabilities and its own. Like, it would be baked into its plan of like how it's going to generate energy as part of the plan for the star. So definitely, these things here are very good. I did want to ask you about nuclear energy a bit more, if that's all right. What is your view on nuclear energy, and is it kind of like the solution to all of our problems, and especially things like SMR? Is it SMRs, the small nuclear reactor stuff?
Yeah, I don't know, because my view on nuclear changes quite a lot.
Is it?
There's been a few times where I'm really big advocate of it, and then I watch a video or something, and I'm like, no, nuclear's not the answer.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what nuclear's great at.
All right.
It's a great provider of baseload energy in the sense that it's low carbon and it's available all day, unlike solar and wind, and it provides a lot more energy than solar and wind in terms of its like volumetric energy density, right?
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it's great, and it's also got a lower marginal cost compared to coal and gas.
Yeah.
But then the things that kind of make nuclear unfavorable for me is firstly its high capital expenditure.
Right.
So look at Hinkley Point C, right? It's costed in the regions of billions of pounds.
Yeah.
And the reason that doesn't get put into the merit order in terms of how much its marginal costs are is because it gets its payments through the capacity market. And if you look at the capacity market, that is essentially funded for by us, the taxpayer. So it's kind of indirect. It's an indirect cost on us, basically, the capital expenditure of nuclear.
Yeah.
And I think you could argue that, okay, as we get more and more efficient at building nuclear plants, that capex will reduce, which is a very plausible argument.
Yeah.
But I would also say that I watched a documentary recently on Sellafield, which is a nuclear decommissioning site in North England, right? And that is still going to be in operation 100 years from now,
right?
In terms of providing jobs to the local community. And I think we need to fully appreciate the lifetime of a nuclear power plant. It doesn't just finish once it's finished producing electricity.
Yeah.
The decommissioning process is very expensive in terms of human capital, economics, but also in terms of the environment, because nuclear isotopes last for like thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And you can't just have that sitting around like near a town or a city, because that radiation is obviously toxic.
Yeah.
It's going to cost a lot of money to create facilities to, I guess, lock that away for thousands of years.
Yeah.
At the minute, they're using, or they're looking at putting it underground or in caverns and stuff. But there's issues with that as well, because it can slowly make its way into the environment through the ground or through the water supply.
Yeah.
So it's there's no such thing as a miracle fuel unless you look at nuclear fusion, which isn't around yet.
Oh yeah.
I do think it has got a part to play. I'm not going to say we shouldn't do nuclear at all.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the one magic solution, and we should all get behind it and it's perfect or whatever.
Yeah.
Because it has a high cost after the plant gets decommissioned.
Yeah. There's a lot.
That's the part we don't see. It's the part we don't see,
Yeah,
and that's what the documentary was highlighting for me. It's the hidden cost in society.
Yeah, that's so key. That's really key, because I remember the first section of the manifesto was essentially communicating this point, like you've got to think about the long-term consequences of policy decisions, and not just think about, well, that seems to be working in the short term. That long-term view of things, the hidden costs, that's what real statecraft is about, like trying to identify the consequences of actions and policies. And if you can do that more successfully, the better you are at statecraft.
I think we're at a point with nuclear where the first nuclear power plants were built in the 1950s, right? And so they've been running for 60, 70 years. And we're only now starting to get an appreciation of the long-term costs of decommissioning nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
It's something that we'll have more of an idea about in 20, 30 years' time,
Yeah.
But it wasn't as well known like 10, 15 years ago. There are some interesting advancements with nuclear, because there's a new nuclear fuel source called thorium. So at the minute we use uranium, and thorium is supposed to be a bit cleaner and more efficient than uranium. And actually India has quite a large deposit of thorium. So it could be something that India implements in the future. But
interesting.
Yeah, it's I personally think renewables are a good way to go if battery storage technology gets to where it needs to be, because renewables are harnessing free energy,
right,
essentially.
Yeah.
And you can look at the economics of building solar and wind. It's a lot cheaper than it was 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. I guess there's pros and cons to everything, right? Because like even with like solar panels, you take up land and destroy habitats and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's all about like there's always trade-offs. There's always opportunity costs with everything we employ, and it's about having a diverse approach and not fixed on any single one, which is good. I think even with nuclear as well. I think what the biggest issue in nuclear energy right now is there's not enough competition in that space. It's mainly like nationalized efforts, like state-led efforts that do this. There's a lot of regulations to get through, that kind of thing. So the way it would even like the costs start coming down, the same intuition that we sort of like derive from other markets. Okay, whenever a market privatizes, costs start coming down, efficiency increases, there's a lot of competition, innovation, etc. Right? The reason why that's not happened with nuclear is because there is a societal stigma as well, even amongst policymakers and the public at large, with the dangers of nuclear. Like we hear things like the Chernobyl, the Fukushima, these kind of things, right? And it kind of puts us off. But even though there is still like safety standards or whatever, but like when it goes wrong, it goes really wrong, which is what people get scared of. But I think the way to go about it, in my opinion, from an Azaadi's perspective, is that you deregulate the nuclear industry and you privatize it. But you can only do that if you have a competent enough and very, very strong justice system. So, like, for example, if a nuclear... You want to create the incentives as such, where a nuclear power plant isn't just dumping its toxic waste, like, near a village or whatever, right, or in the river. It should be punished for that severely. And those punishments should be so severe, it should provide a negative incentive to these companies, to these power plants, nuclear providers, that they think, okay, well, no, it's not in our best interest to like try and shove this off in a river. It's in our best interest to dispose of this safely and carefully, and innovate to do that so that we can avoid legal repercussions. And so you can only do that in a society that has its justice system on lock. And obviously there are ways to solve these. They're just not economic right now. Like sending nuclear waste to space could be an option, but if the rocket goes wrong and it blows up, then we're screwed. That's like a nuclear missile going off. And then like burying it's an option, or creating new technologies. A lot of the solutions to a lot of these things is innovation, like new technologies, like even like health as well. A lot of the solution to health problems is more innovation, more tech. Even when it comes to things like political situations, like the reason why the British were able to conquer a lot of the world was because they were innovated faster than everyone else, right? The technology. Obviously, we Sikh should be aware of this, and we Sikh shouldn't be allergic to technology either, especially innovation. Like our gurus themselves were innovators, and they encouraged us to use the latest and greatest things as well. So there's a lot to think about here. I mean, a lot of some more avenues of discussion. I'm going to read through the chat now and see if there are any interesting points I want to just repeat anyone said. If you guys get any questions, let me know. If anyone in the Darbar on the Discord wants to say anything about anything as well, feel free to jump in. Let me just have a read through. I think we should start first. I think we can start first at a local level, possibly by subsidizing solar panels. If we only rely on one company for overall power, there's a possibility of the company turning corrupt. Yeah, 100%. The idea is that we want to try and avoid the monopolization. The government is essentially, like we call it a company, and then we see government as a different thing, but they're both still organizations. And the key is not to have, we want one company rather than one government sorting things out. No, the key is having many entities sorting things out. And I'm a bit apprehensive of subsidies, because that still requires basically taxpayers' funds to finance something. I think it should be market efforts, where it's voluntary transactions rather than involuntary distributions of wealth. But yeah, you're right, we should not rely on one company. And if someone hacks or does something to the power plant, then there goes the whole power. Yeah, exactly. So we don't want to have this single point of failure. Energy generated locally, so each individual generates their own power. Yeah, as you think mentioned in his last slide, yeah, this I think is the way, localized generation. Okay, let's see what else it says. Yeah, a lot of thank yous, and then a lot of symbols from corporation. How would you explain to the future generations that this decayed for thousands of years? Yeah, this is a really interesting point, actually. You've raised here, JB, saying that I had think about this, and I also came across some arguments about how you do it. It's like you probably create myths, like as myths and stories are something that will persist, like even throughout civilizations. So civilizations can rise and fall, but myths will kind of like keep on going. So, for example, you might not be able to explain, oh yeah, there's this process of nuclear decay where an atom splits and it becomes unstable, all that kind of stuff. How are you going to relay that through civilization and as languages develop? But if you create a myth, oh, there's a cursed area over there. If you go there, you'll die. And create like some stories around it. Those stories might persist through thousands of years, like the Ramayana has, for instance, or like the flood myths that we see dotted around the world. So these are like common myths, and they can embed or encode wisdom within them. Like even if you take it literally, or if you take it metaphorically, you'll still know both instances. Okay, there's an area over there. We should probably stay away from it because it causes death, or cessation of experience. So it's probably through, yeah, as you mentioned, like symbols and maybe not a cult, but like probably some kind of like myths that you can spread through societies that persist throughout civilizations. So it's very interesting. Line of inquiry, how exactly you would communicate to basically a future humanity and try to predict, regardless of the situation they end up in, either hyper advanced or they come back to like Stone Ages. Like how do we communicate information from now to then over the long time periods? And I think like memes and myths are probably the most impactful, the most resilient forms of communication throughout generations that we know of. But yeah, or maybe building big stone monuments to things. Maybe that might help. Okay, so what if we outsource nuclear energy production to other countries? Who would be ready to take on these risks in exchange for capital?
I can try to answer that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's a good question, but you got to remember at the same time, if we're exporting our energy production to reduce the risks of or minimize the risks of nuclear waste, we're also exporting our energy generation, which is, if you remember, one of the three components of the energy trilemma is energy security.
Yeah.
You've now given countries bargaining power or leverage over your energy supply, and so if you wanted to establish diplomatic relations with them, they've got a lot of power in those negotiations because they can say we can just shut off the transmission network to your country, right? So yeah, I think just the point is, if you're exporting the dangers of nuclear accidents, you're also exporting your ability to generate energy domestically.
Very good answer. I guess the way you probably get around it is again another Azaadi's principle is just decentralize, rather than relying on one country, rely on many. Because you're probably going to need more than one nuclear power plant, right? And then it's the art of the game, right? You have diplomacy. And have your guys there as well, because have a trade essentially. Yeah, you're buying something off them, but give something in return, like form mutual relationships. I wouldn't say it's out of question. I'd probably just say it's like there's a politics involved that you gotta have to navigate. And then also the fact is what you mentioned as well, Ajit, about energy transmission is a whole thing to consider in itself, right? So how do we get the energy produced by country B to country A? Okay, cool.
Yeah. And I think just going back to like the idea of self-reliance as well. So there's going to be an aspect of trade, and with other entities of other decentralized communities.
Yeah.
But we should try and balance both.
Cool.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, and then there's some questions in the WhatsApp group chat. So it says, I don't have a question related to energy markets. Would like to ask regarding Azaadi's plan in acquiring land to implement Azaadi's policies. If you can't reveal anything about this, it's good. You can ignore this question in the street. Oh, too late for that now. I've read it out. So, yeah, there is something going on behind the scenes. I think we're quite a bit off, bit of time off actually acquiring land for things. And it does relate to our grand strategy a bit. But I'll reveal this in time as it becomes more relevant. So do keep posted. Next week, this week coming, I'm going to try and get out a new project we've been working on called the Sikh Spaces project. It's a Vichaar repo, and it's basically trying to explain how there's different types of Sikh spaces, not just a Gurdwara. And these can range from things like Dharamsars to Shastragars, Shaunis. What else have we got? Bungas as well, obviously. There's more than one Akade as well as the other one. There's more than one type of Sikh space. So like whenever someone wants to set up a Sikh space, we shouldn't just think, oh, let's go set up a Gurdwara. There's many different things we can do, and some of these are like acquiring land, like acquiring like some kachata somewhere, like an open field, and then doing more like kind of like regular activities like organic farming, horse riding stables, like camping, bushcraft skills, and doing like a monthly bar there as well in person, having these multi-purpose land usage. So yeah, we'll talk about this more in the Sikh Spaces project about how exactly we could do this, and we'd like to invite people who have done similar things to contribute to it by giving us their sort of like essentially like business plans of like how they're setting up their akade or their shonis or their even their dharamsals or whatever or gyms, and then it can help inspire other Sikhs who want to set up their own Sikh space and see how others have done it. They can come to this area essentially in the Bunga, and they can basically see all these different case studies, cost lists, that kind of thing, of how they can go about setting up their own Sikh space. So yeah, we'll maybe talk about that a bit more in the coming week, or at least this month hopefully, and then next the bar I can update you guys about that. But yeah, that's good. I don't think there's any more questions. I think that's pretty much it. Unless anyone has any questions about not just the talk or anything we've outputted in general, or just a perspective on a topic or anything they want to know. If not, we'll probably call the bar to an end now. Thank you everyone who joined, and we'll probably post this recording up on YouTube soon after, maybe tomorrow or during the next week. But yeah, obviously, if you got any questions and stuff during the month, do try and reach out. I mean, my reply times aren't the greatest. I will try and get back to you, but some people are like sometimes they get really late. Like it can be like months sometimes. It's just because of the sheer volume of messages and stuff we get. So I need to figure out a proper system to do that. Hopefully these bars help alleviate some of that, where people can submit questions. I might actually start answering questions I collect during the month in these bars. So yeah, a lot of that. Anything else I need to mention before we finish? I don't think so. Yeah, but thank you, Ajit, for presenting today. That was really good. If anyone wants to present in the next Darbar on a topic of they think is important, do get in touch, reach out, whether that be the Bunga members or anyone from the audience, us wider Sangat who attended today. Yeah, just reach out. We'll be interested in hearing more perspectives, more expert opinions, etc. Let's start doing the Vichaars that are long overdue, and raise the level of discourse of Azaadi in this month. So yeah, Waheguru Khalsa, Sri Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.